Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Bryce struggles to accept Danika's last undiscovered truth, her secret mate, Baxian, who reveals the mystery of Sofie's last message. The gang regroups to identify the room that Sofie gained entry to and sets up a plan to access it at the risk of everything they hold dear. Each team member begins to make their peace and resolve loose threads before their operation to break into the Crystal Palace. But when Day is taken away mid-conversation and implies that she's been caught, Ruhn, Bryce, and Hunt agree to accelerate their plans and rely on Cormac and Tharion to cause a distraction. Inside the palace, Bryce discovers the truth about the Asteri and how their destruction could change their world as they know it. The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series and extended universe spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
If you are enjoying the podcast, check out our Patreon for more exclusive content. You can find us at patreon.com/Book Talk for Book Talk. Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we're exploring Sarah J. Maas's second installment in the Crescent City series. This is Jac.
And I'm Amy. This is part 1 of this week's episode, where we're discussing chapters 65 through 71 in House of Sky and Breath.
This week we ask ourselves, in the penultimate episode, the characters are all facing internal battles and realities. Are the conversations and feelings they have, save for this segment of the novel, aligned with our expectations/understanding as readers?
Themes we see in this section include unfinished business and freedom versus slavery.
As a note to the listener, we are recording separate in different locations, different states. Some might say different universes.
I'm in Prithian.
Yes. Damn it, why can't I be? I was going to say, also, this is like for the first time, we never do this, but this has just been a week and a day. We both have a drink in our hands.
We never do this during a regular season. But
No, but it's been one.
It's been one, and we appreciate everybody's patience with us. If the recording quality is different, if we're a little bit giggly, I hope it just adds to the humor of this episode.
I hope you still like us. Okay, now let's begin.
We start in chapter 65, and Bryce is not having any of Baxian's shit. And it's not really shit. Bryce just isn't in the mood after all the teleporting and near death at Erd's temple. As a reminder, we are in the tunnels leaving Erd's temple, and Baxian has just revealed that he is Danika's mate. Now, just as a different reminder, Bryce is the one who's been telling Hunt for a while now that Baxian fits in with the group, that we should give him a chance. So it's hilarious and ironic that she's the one who's like pointing
No.
the gun at
Yeah.
Baxian right now.
She's like, not today.
Not today. And part of it is the setting and timing, and part of it is the Danika of it all.
Mm.
And in my mind, Bryce is upset because for Baxian to be Danika's mate, it kind of desecrates her friend's memory.
I mean, the whole memory of Danika is kind of being thrown to the wolves, or in this case, the dog. And it's rough. Like, I mean, to even add insult to injury, it sounds like Sabine even knew about it.
Mhm.
Quote, so Baxian kind of talks about Sabine. He says, quote, "She always hated and feared me because I saw how horrible she treated her daughter and wouldn't put up with it. Maybe Sabine didn't know exactly that they were mates, but she clearly knew that Baxian and Danika cared for each other. And it's just another thing that Danika didn't tell Bryce."
Mhm. Mhm. But her mom knew. Her mom
No.
knew about Mordock and Baxian, and Bryce
That's
had no
rough.
idea.
That's rough. There's like a lot of subtext because I don't think Bryce is. I'm not gonna say that. Think. I know for a fact Bryce is not clearly saying what she's thinking here. So we're gonna have to infer quite a bit because it's overwhelming. So of course the reader's not gonna know specifically. And I feel like there's a lot of different interpretations. And one of the things that I'm interpreting, and one of the things I'm flagging, again, there's many things here, but I feel like Bryce is kind of immediately comparing herself to Danika because Baxian says, quote, "You think she would have told you that her mate was someone in Sandriel's Triari, the Hellhound?" It's interesting because like Bryce just declared the Umbra Mortis as her mate. And, a lot of people still don't know that Hunt, the Umbra Mortis, is a good guy.
And Hunt was in Sandriel's Triari.
Yeah. And she'll even mention it again, like, "No, I wouldn't have cared." But I think that's like a fair thing to say, like, what? I did. I just
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
And then also like a quick note of the tattoo placements. We have the fact that, Baxian's tattoo of, love through love, all is possible. Is that what it says?
Mhm.
It's over his heart. It's because Danika has his heart. And then for Bryce, it's on her back because Danika has her back. Isn't that
Mm.
sweet?
It is really sweet.
Yeah. But all of this brings out a really bad side of Bryce that I don't like. I don't know.
Mhm.
She's multifaceted and not everyone's perfect, but Danika was looking into Baxian because of his quote unique shifter ancestry, right? And then Bryce says, quote, "You shift into a dog. What's unique about that?" Even Hunt gave her a disapproving frown. She didn't care. She was sick of these surprises about Danika, about all the things she'd never known. This sounds a little specious, Bryce.
Mm, mhm,
That's
mhm,
not
mhm.
very that's not her. That's very not her. So like you can tell like she's definitely like just reaching for things because she's at her wit's end. She's just trying to find something to insult him with. And of course it would be the dog thing because it feels like everyone shits on him for being a dog shifter. Even Ethan was shitting on Baxian for that. To which I
Yeah.
have to say is dogs are cool.
Yeah, but if you think of a wolf is more aggressive,
No, I
more
know.
majestic.
Yeah, say that. Go say that to Rowan, the little wiener dog.
Oh,
That's
yeah, 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 I
in the
will.
next room from you. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
you're not as majestic as a wolf.
Yeah.
Mm. Lies.
He's a poser.
He's majestic as fuck. Either way, though, I think her anger at Danika is justified, but should not be directed at him, of course. But that's all that she has is there. That's easier said than done.
Right, exactly. And, Baxian as Danika's mate is a great stand-in because you hurt Baxian, you hurt
Mm-hmm.
Danika.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I also wonder, though, if Danica's I mean, I'm sure Danica's unwillingness to tell Bryce, there's many, many reasons related to safety, related to, secrecy about all the other things she's doing. But also, was Danica ashamed of the fact that Baxian was a dog?
Yeah. Mm.
Is that why Sabine doesn't throw it in Bryce's face? Because of shame that he's a dog.
He's an
Shame.
angel. He's an angel dog.
Yeah, but
All dogs go to heaven. 1990s classic.
we saw with Ethan, the shifter side took
I know, they don't care.
priority.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't care. So that's one thing to think about is if Danica also felt shame related to the shifting ability. I want to look at this moment from a power perspective. Now, we all know Bryce is getting sick of uncovering more and more secrets that Danika kept hidden. Sofie and Emil was already a breaking point. Bryce already, anything above and beyond Danika's murder and the facts associated with that was already bringing Bryce to the end of her rope.
Mm-hmm.
Those strings were frayed. So when we get to Baxian and the mate secret, I feel like my interpretation of this is that Baxian and the mate secret is bigger than the rebel secret, because a mate is soul altering.
Yeah.
Whether you're not with the rebels, whatever, we know that it is soul altering based on Bryce's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if we assume that Bryce views Danika as kind of like a soul sister, right?
Yeah.
They're not genetically sisters, but they are on a soul level. That's a huge harm to Bryce to never know that her sister's soul was altered by a mate.
Yeah.
Right? Because Bryce probably wouldn't, if Danika were alive and she met Hunt and was with Hunt, we don't know, Bryce would assume that she would tell Danika
Yeah, of
about
course.
Hunt.
Yeah.
So what this all boils down to, in a moment when Bryce finally feels like she's getting control of her magic, she's teleporting, she's losing control with the rebel situation, and now she's lost control of the Danika situation again, the lack of information. We also have to take into account every time Bryce learns something about Danika. Bryce finishes the business Danika started that Danika did not finish. Whether or not she intends to or not, Bryce and Danika have a pattern where Danika starts shit and Bryce ends shit. So, did you read my notes about this?
Yeah, and I have a comment. So you read your note because it's a good note.
So we start with way back in the past, when they are in college. Danika discovered a network of abused animals. She wanted to go free them, so Bryce goes with her to free the animals. And ultimately, when they're caught by the security, that's when Bryce reveals she's starborn, blinds everybody, they kill the security. So that's the start. And then they start this pattern. We have the synth and the horn, which leads to Danika's murder. So Bryce goes about uncovering the truth about synth, finds the horn, and kills Micah, who is Danika's murderer. Then she learns about the rebels and Sofie and Emil. So what does she do? She looks for Emil. She looks for Sofie. She works for the rebel cause. If she has an opportunity to avenge Sofie, she might get to that too at some point. So now she learns Danika had a mate. Danika was looking into the Asteri and into Ancestry. So what is she going to go do? Charge into the Asteri stronghold to find out what the fuck is going on.
I think we're not looking at other options she has to help finish Danika's messes, and that is literally finish Baxian off. That is...
She could marry him too.
I was like three-way scene. That's what...
Exactly.
Give us the art. There's a reason why God didn't make me an artist.
Because you would be prolific.
I'd be so prolific. It would be bad.
Danika and Bryce have been fulfilling the same roles of creator and finisher since they were teenagers in college, like 18, 19, 20. No wonder why Bryce is tired of this shit. No wonder why she keeps uncovering things, because whether she's conscious of it or not, she is obligated to go tie that loose thread for Danika. So when Baxian says, quote, "After we met, she started hunting for a way into a world where we could be together, since there was no way Sabine or Sandriel or even the Asteri would have allowed it." This is the moment Bryce finally lowers the gun she's pointing at Baxian, and ultimately where I think a turning point for Bryce. Because this is also when Baxian's like, oh, I know the sequence of numbers. I know it's a room in the Asteri archives.
It's hard because like everything about this is like so many reasons to rage. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of like, shit, another thing I'm going to have to finish up for you, Danika. And then like another source of rage is the fact that Danika's focus went from Bryce to Baxian. Like are you reading my notes? I can see your eyes. Amy's nodding.
I shall take a drink and let you speak.
Yeah, like you're reading my stuff. Let me amaze you. Okay, so in CC1, Danika is looking into synth, right? And that why is the reason of that? Because we hear that Danika has a friend who's half Vanir, half human. So that was the initial reason. And then in CC2, Danika's really looking to help her and Baxian. So her priorities went from her and Bryce to her and Baxian. And I want to go back to that quote that you read which says, quote, "But after we met, she started hunting for a way into a world where we could be together." Like literally, like Prithian, like, because how does she end up with the horn? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that is an amazing point because the way it's worded is not about
Mm-hmm.
creating a better world.
Yep.
It's basically going in, it's literally into a world,
Yep.
into a different world.
To go create, like, to go find a place that they could be together.
Yeah. So take the horn away
Yeah,
because that's going to open the gate. It's
exactly. It definitely
mind-blowing.
says that it definitely, I read that as like Danika had other plans.
Yeah.
I can also see why Bryce would be jealous too, because Bryce asks if Danika told Baxian that he loved her, and he says, quote, "Yes," Baxian replied without a moment of hesitation. Danika had once claimed she'd only said those words to Bryce, to her, not to this stranger, this male who'd freely and willingly served Sandriel. Hunt had been given no choice in the matter. "She didn't care that you're a monster?" It's a really ugly side of Bryce. And,
Yeah.
like, two things can be true, Bryce. Like, she could have said that she only told you that she loved you, and then the next day met Baxian. Like,
Yeah.
you don't get to own one person's love. And, like, I get it. She's grieving. This is like a surprise out of nowhere. And I don't think that, and, to your point that you made earlier, this is a very stressful situation. She might have had a different attitude. I think in many regards, it could be a, "Oh my God, here's another person who knew and loved Danika.
Mhm.
Let's
Mhm.
both mourn together."
Yeah.
But, stressful situations does not leave room for that.
No, I mean, if they had just been playing pool at a dive bar and had a great
Mhm.
night together and Baxian revealed this, I can guarantee Bryce would have reacted differently.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when he tells her, like, "Hey, Danika loved you. You were the most important person in her life." And then Bryce's reaction is, quote, "Shut up. Just shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear it." She's not in the mindset to hear what's going on. My note was, "Through love, all things are possible, except Danika's honesty."
Danica's honesty is impossible.
Truly. Everything's possible minus that.
Yeah, it's a really unfortunate situation, and it's another reason why readers might not be into Bryce.
It's hard.
Yeah, this is in the last 100 pages. I'm trying to do math in my head. This is within the last 11% of this
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And this is not a
This is
good look.
not it. No,
This
this
is
is
not
not
a
a
good
good
look.
look. And it's also, like, understandable, but also frustrating.
Very, very frustrating.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, this is when we find out that Baxian knows that number of sequins on Sofie's arms and that those numbers are for a vault in the Asteri archives, which Baxian ultimately gave to Danika, who gave it to Sofie, who then went to Kavala to get a meal and started this whole book off.
Mhm.
So what you're telling me is that if Bryce and Hunt had been nice to Baxian
Mhm.
and gotten this information from him by being nice and letting him be vulnerable with them,
Yep.
we could have saved 700 pages of this book.
Well, at the very least 300.
Sure. Let's
Yeah.
maybe I'm being overly generous.
Yeah.
Let's say 300 pages.
Yeah, yeah.
Are we okay with that? Is it
Mm.
just another version of a miscommunication trope?
Okay, so the reason why I'm gonna say it's okay-ish is because Baxian hadn't done anything to earn their trust.
Mhm.
Now, the problem is he also did
Yes.
fairly early on. He eventually did enough things to earn their trust. And then in that one conversation when he's like, "Let me in, I know things."
Mhm.
I wish that now at that point, Baxian doesn't know what they know about the numbers. Otherwise, I think
Right.
he would have told them.
Right.
But at that point, it does come into a lot of, like, not he said, she said, but woulda, coulda, shoulda, where,
Mhm.
Baxian could have laid out his cards about Danika,
Yeah,
and that would have changed things too.
I completely agree, especially after Idra.
Yeah. And I don't know why he didn't. Like, I can understand why Bryce and co. didn't fully trust him yet, even though he's done plenty of things to save him, but there's, like, centuries of him being a shitty guy. Okay, I get it, but why doesn't Baxian want to talk to Bryce more about Danika?
Right, right. Even if he doesn't share the information about the Asteri archives,
Yeah.
why didn't the Danika information come
Yeah.
sooner? Because it
Mhm.
didn't require trust building to get there.
No, and, like, what's the worst that's discovered? It's gone, like, the Asteri can't use that over him anymore, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Right.
not a dangerous thing to know that he was mated to Danika.
Yeah.
You know, parties involved are dead.
Yeah. So I just bring it up because it reminds me of that meme that you see in various forms of, if Qui-Gon Jinn had just told Anakin, no, I'm not going to train you, bitch. Like the whole Star Wars series wouldn't have happened and would
Yeah,
have saved a lot of grief.
yeah.
So,
If people just weren't so greedy with taxes in Star Wars, you wouldn't have a lot of other issues.
right. So I just have to point it out because a
Yeah.
lot of effort and or at least some effort could have been saved if Baxian had
Mhm.
just come clean sooner. And after Idra is a reasonable time for that to happen.
I would have liked a moment of her saying, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?"
Yeah, same.
And I think that would have been a reasonable thing for her to have asked, but at that point, I bet it's, like, just trying to save word count at this point and, like, trying to
Yeah.
cut what necessary, but we're gonna cover plenty of things that I feel like we could have cut, so, yeah, let's continue. Before we get into the plot, when the gang are all back together, right, Bryce tells Ethan about Danika and Baxian, and she says, quote, "It wouldn't have mattered to me." And then Ethan says, "Really? It would have mattered to me," Ethan countered, "to everyone." What I wonder there is, like, is Bryce being honest with herself? And I think now she's being honest with herself. Like, if she had found this information out sooner in this book, I don't think it would have mattered. Now, this is all after Hunt. What about a pre-Hunt Bryce? What of a pre-Danica death Bryce? The Bryce who we know she was depressed. She's talked about how she was depressed during that time, even with Danica. Would that Bryce have been understanding as this current Bryce is? And I think the answer to that is no. And I think the reason why it's obvious that the answer to that is no is because Bryce doesn't dwell on it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I don't think who Bryce is in this moment is the same Bryce
Mhm.
from the past.
Yeah.
And up until at least this summer, after Hunt, after the events of the first book,
Mhm.
could Bryce ever be in a place to accept this information?
Yeah, absolutely.
At this point, Bryce and Hunt get home, and the gang gets together to make Declan see if he can hack into the Asteri archives. And when that's not possible, the palace cameras. And of course, I'm like, why is the firewall in the archives better than on the cameras?
Yeah.
Granted, it could be part of whatever trap the Asteri have set up for Bryce and company,
Mhm.
but I just want to point that out. Declan also tells Bryce and Hunt, quote, "You realize that what you're doing right now amounts to treason." Hunt responds, "We owe you big time." Declan says, "Pay me in booze. It'll be a comfort while I worry about when the dread wolves will show up at my door." Ruhn then hands over a glass of whiskey. And it's a nice little moment for a number of reasons. First, humor always
Mhm.
offsets the feelings of tension and danger. That is going to come up multiple times in this episode. But I also think it's important that if we look at alcohol as a vice or
Mhm.
as like an indulgence, just, one moment of vice, one moment of indulgence is sufficient to commit treason.
Mhm.
And to me, what that demonstrates is just how willing everyone is to break the current system of power. Like,
Yeah.
it's no skin off their back, though literally it could kill them,
Yeah.
to go up against the Asteri. Like,
But they're like, "We wanna do this too."
yeah, they are all in.
Yep. I mean, that humor though in this moment, like SJM really is trying to create a really light moment in a really tense moment.
Mhm.
And this what I'm about to read in this whole scene, I'm like, this might be the last funny parts in this book.
Yeah.
But so Bryce and Flynn start to argue and quote, she said to Flynn, "Hey, remember the time you set a dragon free and were dumb enough to think she'd follow your orders? Hey, remember the time you wanted to marry me and wrote Lady Bryce Flynn in all your notebooks?" Hunt choked. Bryce countered with, "Hey, remember when you pestered me for years to hook up with you, but I have something called standards?" "This is highly unusual behavior for royals," Hypaxia observed. "You have no idea," Ruhn muttered, earning a smile from the queen. So why is this important? Why are these moments that Amy and I pointing out, why are they so important? We are currently discovering these life-altering truths for these characters, right? Everything is high stake. They're committing treason, and it helps release the tension, and it
Mhm.
keeps the characters very true to who they are.
Yeah, which I think is important when you're in the high stakes moments because if you don't have a mechanism to keep them true to themselves, then
Mhm.
everyone is kind of the same,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
no differentiating the characters from one another other than dialogue tags or,
Mhm.
whatever narrative you choose to use. I think also the use of the humor injects normalcy into this moment. I think it does what the alcohol does, which is these individuals
Mhm.
are fully aware of themselves, who they are, and you know, the decisions that they're making.
Yeah.
And they have no remorse while doing this. Like,
Yep.
there is not an ounce of regret, though there's going to be conversations in a little
Mhm.
bit. There isn't true regret by
Mhm.
this decision.
Yeah. And I think I personally would have appreciated a little bit more conversation around this decision because it
Mm.
feels very one-sided of Bryce to make
Hmm.
that choice. Because at this point, they see Sofie going into the room, right? And she comes out of the room, and everyone's like, whoa, she's like really shaken up there. And Bryce announces to everyone, like, they need to get into that room. And even Hunt is sitting there being like, I don't know, this feels, quote, perilously close to what he'd done with the Fallen. No one's really challenging it. Like, it doesn't
Hmm.
feel like a conversation because Bryce only says out loud, quote, I want to know what Sofie knew, what Danika was willing to risk so much to discover. But internally, the conversation she's having is, quote, after the truth Baxian had dropped, she needed the full story more than ever. It didn't only have to do with wanting the intel as leverage against the Asteri. Danica had thought this information could change the world, save it somehow. How could she walk away from it now? I have a lot of feelings about this. On one side, I'm like, okay, would she have cared as much if Danica wasn't involved like this, you know? And I know that there's another sense of altruism because she's like, it might change the world. I should do something about it. But she's also putting everyone else in danger, like, and it just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it never feels like there's a conversation that everyone goes around and says, is it worth going into here to maybe find information that might help without even them talking about what quote unquote help might mean?
Yeah. So I have many different thoughts about
Mhm.
this. I'm going to start with personally, I'm not sure if this works,
Mhm.
but here are the ways I can or cannot rationalize it in my brain.
Yeah.
First off, everyone is listening to Bryce and accepting Bryce's decisions, whether or not they have doubts.
Yeah.
Is SJM trying to show us that Bryce is already in that state of queenly leadership and
Mhm.
everyone else
Mhm.
is falling in line?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't know. It's one thing to think about.
Yeah.
To your question about selfishness versus altruism, I do ultimately feel like, maybe with the exception of Hypaxia and Lydia, everybody
Yeah.
is selfish in this
Yeah.
book. Maybe even, Cormac, altruistic
Cormac's perfect. I was like, he's
leaning.
perfect. Don't mess with my Mac Daddy.
At the end of the day, everybody cares about themselves and
Yeah.
their mates. I think
Yep.
I think Cormac started out altruistic, and then Sofie came along, and now he's like
Yeah.
everybody else of like,
Yeah,
my
but
mate.
she's g so now he's like, "Let's burn it all to hell."
Right, exactly. On the flip side, Bryce has always been good at heart and does good, ultimate good for those around her.
Yeah.
That being said, I think Bryce, as a 25-year-old,
Mhm.
probably only understands her motivations in terms of those around her, in the context of her friends, in the context of Danica, in the context of what she can influence in her immediate circle.
Yeah.
And so, is that the language by which she explains what she's feeling? And is she ultimately altruistic and
Mhm.
feels duty bound as a starborn princess, but is not able to justify or speak to those feelings outside of the context of her friends? So I think there's a lot of complexity, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard. There's a lot of reasons and understanding of what could happen, but, like, we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but, in case it's been a week, people maybe they don't remember last episode. But there's just so many moments that were not in Bryce's head.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a conversation that happens later in this episode that comes a little too late for me
Hmm.
and would have been more beneficial here and had it been a group conversation.
Yeah. I think one thing that's important for us to keep in mind as we continue the episode, like I've said before, this is the last 100 pages of the
I
book.
know. This is the end.
This book is 800 pages long. To add more conversation slows down the pace of what is Estrium's not trademark, but pattern of the last 25% is go, 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 go.
Yes, but the conversation will still be had. It's just private with her and Hunt, and that's where it. We'll come back to that when it's time.
Okay.
We'll come back to it.
I do want to point out on the topic of altruism versus selfishness, Bryce knows she is causing a PTSD episode for Hunt without overtly thinking it, but her actions say she is okay with it, that it is worthy of what they are doing. Quote, Hunt tensed beside her, and Bryce knew that particular sort of tautness on his face, knew he was shutting out his vivid memories of the throne room, the dungeons. She leaned into his side, offered what love she could through the touch. What this tells me is Bryce is willing to cause Hunt harm or elicit a PTSD reaction for whatever her motivation is, whether it is a selfish motivation to find out about Danika or an altruistic motivation to find out more about the Asteri that could lead to their demise. Is that acceptable?
No. And again, like, I know, okay, you know what? I'm not waiting. We're having this conversation now. She needed to have this conversation with Hunt. It's, I know it slows down the pace. I know it adds more words. There's plenty that I feel like we could cut in these last 100 pages. But, and even if it slows it down, then that's a risk you have to take. And how much is the formula that she's sticking to hurting the plot? Because SJM, yeah. Because Bryce recognizing his PTSD and not talking to him about it and not saying, like, you are in this as much as me, that ends up really having a negative impact, I feel like, in the reader experience of them judging Bryce.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Like, that's just going to mean maybe that's what should have been the question of the day, where it's like, when should she have talked to him?
Yeah, because if, ultimately Bryce saves the conversation of, are you with me or not, until 70% of the way through Flame and Shadow?
Yeah, I mean, they'll kind of have it in a little bit, but it's not enough. There's too much at stake for people to not have a very plain conversation.
Yeah.
So now everyone kind of leaves. Ethan and Tharion have a heart-to-heart, talk about talk about scenes that I'm willing to cut that aren't needed. And in this scene, I'm also going to ignore this thing about Sunball that's a reference because it hurt me too much, or I was like, no, we're not engaging with this anymore. So Ethan asks Tharion, why did you get engaged? And Tharion says, quote, because I was horny and stupid and wanted to fuck her so badly that I swore myself to her, thinking I could undo it in the morning. Tharion sees the mistakes very clearly, but he still makes the mistakes with the leopard shifter and something that he'll do later. The only reason why this scene happens is so that he can say this sentence right here is I wanted it, her being sex, so badly that I swore myself, thinking I could undo it in the morning. He's literally going to do that in just a chapter or two.
Which says, even though he's going to try and close the loop with the princess, River Queen's daughter, he has not learned his lesson.
No, not at all. None.
Ethan is such a bro because all his response is, that's rough, dude. He takes it in stride. There's no judgment, which maybe a friend should do, but I don't think so. A friend should be willing to say, that was a shitty thing to do.
Yeah.
Which tells me Ethan is no better than Tharion.
Yeah. That's funny because you and I had a conversation earlier today where I was like, I did say, oh, that's rough. But I also followed it up with other stuff too,
Yeah. It's I mean, there are times to be empathetic and there are times to call your friend out.
Well, even in my empathetic time, I was still I had, suggestions.
Yeah. You had notes. That's fine.
I had notes. It was, but that's the thing. Friends should have notes. It's you can be empathetic and you can say things and stuff, but maybe the note is here, hey, should we think about our actions before we jump in?
Maybe you shouldn't swear yourself to anybody in the
No, I think
future.
maybe we shouldn't swear ourselves to anyone. Maybe that's the note. Don't worry, he'll learn it eventually. No.
No. No.
No, I know. It's interesting because Ethan ends up being the one that's the most like, "We gotta get Tharion out, guys.
Mhm.
We gotta save him." And
Mhm.
then Flynn and Declan are like, "Ruhn's in the fucking dungeon, my man."
Yeah, yeah.
And Ethan's like, "But Tharion's
But
signed
Tharion
himself
made a
up."
choice.
Yeah, I know, right? And they're just kinda like, "We can't what are you doing? We're trying to." So, I'm wondering. I mean, that's just so Ethan, though, is like, "Let me just
Yeah.
own everyone's mistakes and claim it as my own."
Right,
Eh.
right, right. And we'll get into this, obviously, when we talk about Flame and Shadow, but Tharion not only does it with the Viper Queen,
Mhm.
he also does it with Sathia.
I know. He learns nothing.
He learns nothing.
Just my type. The way that you're laughing, Amy, I could feel that hit you hard and
It
being
did.
a person in my life.
I was trying really hard to not laugh too hard.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I can see that, like, hit your soul for me.
Excuse us while we hydrate and you listen to this ad. Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Tharion then asks Ethan, "Hey, like, do you have anyone?" I'm angry that I have to even speak about him. Quote, "Ethan had no idea why, but the wolf in the astronomer's tank emerged before him." Okay, so he was like, I don't really have anyone except for this really helpless woman who is, floating around. Maybe she'll be my friend." And, because he thinks about Bryce, and like at one point he's like, "Did Ruhn tell you had a thing for Bryce?" And Tharion's like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, everyone has a thing for Bryce." Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's just what
Welcome to the
happens.
club.
Right? Yeah. I feel like SJM was setting this up for a mate romance
Mm-hmm.
situation, because it was, "Do you have anyone?" And he thinks about this, like, rail thin, swimming in her own filth individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who he thinks of in a romantic sense. So either A, SJM changed what happened into CC3, or B, Ethan is the biggest idiot in the world, which I'm willing to say, like, that's what it is, because there's enough clues about Ethan becoming Prime. Now, did she think that he would kill Ethan? Who knows? But I think that it says a lot about Ethan,
Mm-hmm.
regardless, that the first person that comes into his mind is a very, very broken woman.
Yeah, it does say a lot about Ethan. I think it also is completely happenstance because Bryce was Ethan's world. Bryce was a broken human being prior to being with Hunt.
Okay, however, that's not when Ethan was most into her. Because I was thinking that too. Ethan met her in college. Granted, she was still sad and broken. So
I was gonna say she was still sad and broken.
Yeah.
She refused to talk to her brother because of what he said to her. She didn't have a relationship with her father. She was out partying and getting high and taking every possible substance on the planet. I
Mhm.
don't think she was a whole person.
No, she wasn't. I don't think she was a whole person. She was a whole person, but a person that was going through some shit.
She was going through some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ethan likes him a little broken. Because what does that say? He can focus on someone who
Mhm.
needs fixing and not fix himself,
Yeah.
right? He's been broken since his parents died when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
He's been re-broken when his brother is killed.
Yep.
Bryce has moved on. He has no one to fix, and he is unwilling to fix himself. So
Yep.
the second he finds something to hyperfixate on, aka Sigrid,
Mm-hmm.
the wolf mystic, she becomes an easy substitute.
I might have a type of guys and my ex-boyfriends, and that might not be great, but not one of them have wanted to fix me. So, yay?
Yay!
I don't know. So now we're in chapter 66, and Bryce meets with Fury to ask her for help about the layout of the palace. And right now, I think that we're definitely seeing selfish Bryce because Fury says, quote, "Do you know what they'll do to you if you're caught? What they'll do to your family, to Juniper, to punish you?" Now, maybe Bryce has thought it through. Maybe there's been that thought process. But again, we have not seen it. And we've been in her head multiple times at this point. We're not at the point of like, oh, we need to hide Bryce's thoughts because we need to not know about Emil. There's been time.
Yeah.
We should have seen this work be done already. And I think it would be beneficial to get that moment so that like we, the reader, don't dislike her and can like spend time understanding her than anything else. And that last scene that we had with Ethan and Tharion, that's not needed.
I completely agree. That could have been told in the past tense in 2
Mhm.
sentences. That wasn't necessary to be present for. I did also wonder how Bryce doesn't even pick up on the fact that Fury stresses, do you understand what they're going to do to Juniper because
Yeah.
of your actions? That is a passive-aggressive threat from Fury.
Yeah.
And Bryce says nothing because Bryce has not thought about
Mhm.
consequences to Juniper. And Fury is trying to signal, hey, I'm going to kick your ass after they
Yeah.
Asteri kill you if this happens. I think Fury is trying to appeal to their common care for Juniper. But the fact of
Mhm.
the matter is, Bryce only cares about Hunt and Danika. And right now
Yeah.
it's all about Danika. So sorry, Fury. Bryce can't come to the phone right now.
Why? Because Danika's dead. Mm.
That was not planned.
Was it not? Was that what you weren't thinking of that?
Not that Danika's dead.
Oh, okay.
Kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a little pickle that they're in because Bryce keeps trying to get Fury to be interested because I think Bryce knows that Juniper is going to be threatened, and I think she's trying to use that as leverage to get Fury to join her. When that's not quite working, Bryce kind of like changes direction. She says, quote, "So don't you want to know what's in those rooms? What Danika suspected might be inside that one room in particular?" Fury swigged from her vodka on the rocks. "Don't try to convert me to your bullshit cause." Damn. I really struggle because I personally don't feel like there's enough clues as to what's inside the room to justify all this risk. I know we know that something in there can change it all. That's all we know is that it's so disruptive. It's so intense. It can change everything. I don't know if that's enough for like, all right, everyone, time to like risk our family and friends.
Yeah, I think the information trickles in too slowly for us to really believe the risk is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
We might be invested in finding out the truth because we've been, we're 700 pages in
Yeah.
wanting to know what it's about. However, Bryce does not have enough information and has not received enough information.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say to be convinced, but she is convinced. She should not be convinced because there is not enough information.
I'm just wondering where there's a couple times where like SJM in this book has been like done it for the twist, you know?
Mm.
Like one of it was Emil, do it for the twist, like hold
Yeah.
out on information that might not have been beneficial just so that she could go for that
Yeah.
like kapow. And I wonder if the oh my god, we can bring down the Asteri. Maybe that's information that could have been said more explicitly before, but
Mhm.
Bryce doesn't have to know how, and I think that
Right.
could still be the shocking thing. But it's I was just thinking like what's something that would be actually worth it. And I know they say like we don't have explicit whatever is in there, we can take down the Asteri with it.
Yeah, because I think what my problem is that, and I think this gets to what you're saying, Bryce and Hunt start the book just wanting to be normal, just wanting to lie
Mhm.
low, knowing the Asteri are terrible, but you know what? We just want to lie low.
Mhm.
And then the focus becomes Emil for so long.
Yeah.
There is never a conversion to, we're sick and tired of lying low. We need to take out the powers because they have no right
Yeah.
to be the powers anymore. If that had been the focus the whole time, the shift from we want to be normal, we want to lie low, to we no longer accept the regime, we need to cut it down,
Mhm. Mhm.
that would have been a more convincing plot line for me
Agreed.
than the Emil hunt.
You know, you keep mentioning Emil, and I want to be like, Amy, that's a different book. And then the fact that it's all in the same book is upsetting in a way where I'm like, we wasted so much time and so much plot on this kid that we were like, wow, he was human to begin with or to end with all along.
So I think Emil is necessary for Bryce to go full Vanier.
Yes, agreed.
I think Emil is necessary for her to sacrifice her humanity.
Mm-hmm.
However,
To take that long.
I believe it could have taken less time.
Yeah.
The emphasis and the importance of it should have been mitigated.
Mm-hmm.
And there needed to be some other through line for all these characters. The fact that Emil is the only reason why all these characters are constantly together is
Is
insufficient for me.
agreed. I mean, and I think you kind of said it or I made it up, but like the idea of what was the big takeaway from a meal that would have lit the spark for them to say, you know what, we're taking down the Asteri, or
Yeah.
I'm now curious enough to see what's going on with the Asteri. And
Yeah.
that spark didn't happen. That connection from Emil
Yeah.
to this isn't it. And that's why I think SJM's using Danika
Yeah.
as that spark.
Yeah, and this is why I always wanted Sofie to have given Emil more information that Emil could have
Mm-hmm.
passed on to Bryce,
Agreed.
because I think that small change,
Would have
although I
done.
understand it would have done something. I
Yeah.
know on some level Sofie would never have maybe put her brother in danger,
Yeah.
but on the other
We don't know
hand,
her. We can do it.
she should have done it if she was confident she was going to die.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, if you're confident you're going to die and the information you have could take down the Asteri, like,
Yeah.
that's information you pass along. Doesn't matter who it is.
Even if she had given him a clue that leads to you can take down the Asteri.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even if it was something along those lines. Yeah, there's too big of a disconnect from Emil to this moment.
Yeah.
That it just doesn't, the through line is a little hard.
Yep. I completely agree. Going back to the conversation with Fury, I think Fury already knows what's in that room because she
Mm.
doesn't ever deny you don't want to know what's in that room. She doesn't ever say, no, I don't want to know what's in the room. If Sofie can get it in and out undetected, certainly
Of
Fury could
course
get in
Fury
and out
has. Yeah,
undetected.
you're right.
She's been in the palace before.
Yeah.
She just says, don't try to convert me to your bullshit cause. So my theory, and let me continue that quote actually. Quote, I've done work for both sides and neither is worth the time of day. They're certainly not worth your life.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this explains why Fury does not get involved in Flame and Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
I think she already knows what's going on. I think she already thinks it's hopeless, that they're all peons who can't do enough to change the situation. And she's not altruistic. At the end of the day, she's going to protect Juniper and make sure Juniper lives.
Yeah.
And so they will always choose to be on the sidelines, Fury and Juniper, and protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at when Cormac came to the party at the beginning of the book. Fury doesn't stick around. She goes and hides Juniper.
Then what's the point of their characters?
There is no point.
No. And then we end this book with Amryn looks like my friend Fury. Like,
their only point was in Earth and Blood.
their
They
only point,
stopped
yeah.
being relevant in after Earth and Blood.
Then kill them off.
I completely agree.
I would rather them be, if you're going to make them plot points, make them be plot points that move shit.
Yeah.
Rather than just on the sidelines, and to be other female characters that we just don't get in a book that's full of men. And I love these men. I love the art. But damn it, we don't need this.
I need a sip. My throat is hurting because I'm so furious.
I know. I'm so mad too. It's just like I don't like the idea of like women's death progressing a plot just for the sake of it. But I'd rather that than nothing. Because it was just too much setup for nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Fury could have given Bryce more information that makes Bryce motivated to hunt down the Asteri. Yeah. She could have continued to serve purpose in other ways.
Fury is supposed to be this badass who no one knows what she is. She is just she's feared by all. No one even knows what kind of veneer she is. And we get nothing except for the fact that she's really good at flying a helicopter. We see Tharion finally going to break up with his fiancée, the River Queen, who still doesn't have a name.
River Queen's daughter.
The River Queen's daughter, thank you. I mean, in many ways, he's breaking up with the River Queen too, but yes, with her daughter. Quote, Tharion found his fiancée sitting on the edge of the quay off the bone quarter, her delicate feet dipping into the turquoise water, sending waves splashing into the sunlight. The last time we saw some turquoise water was at Idra with Hunt and Bryce when they were all like, oh, look at the water, so pretty. Now we're about to die. So I'm just saying, like, turquoise water equals bad.
Don't be fooled by the water. I think this image is also a beautiful image because it repeats what we've been saying about the River Queen's daughter. It's balance. It's land and sea. She's sitting on the land. Her feet are in the water. Also interesting, she chooses right off the bone quarter. That's a little creepy, but whatever. Maybe he should see her as a threat, and Tharion does not. We know Tharion's here to tie up loose ends, and he's reminded of that purpose when he looks at her. He remembers the River Queen's daughter at the autumnal equinox party. Quote, she'd been so starry-eyed at the party the other night, so elated to be there, dancing and laughing. To me, that's the picture of like youth and innocence. She was just happy to be there, happy to watch people.
Yeah.
And that's a moment Tharion's reminded of what he's stolen from her youth, her innocence.
Yeah.
Who else had their youth stolen from them?
Me.
You. And Tharion's sister.
Yes. Oh, not in a dead way. Yeah. I was just thinking, shit, men dated.
I'm thinking death.
I was thinking dating. Sister. That's fair.
And the only time we've seen Tharion empathetic towards the River Queen's daughter is when he sees her as a picture of innocence, as a picture of youth.
Yeah.
And I have to point that out because it changes real fast.
I know. Because he comes to break up with her, and he just does it in such a guy way also. Quote, this was an awfully public place for this kind of meeting. He knew if he did this at the Blue Court, if her mother got word of it before he could leave, she'd keep him beneath, as trapped as any of the mortals who'd once been dragged below by the mare. Like, he's already assuming what's going to happen, and like, he doesn't help his case. I mean, like, she does like jump up and is like, come underneath with me.
Yeah.
Like, so like, okay, I'll give him that. Like, the queen does come running after him.
He's viewing her as this innocent childlike being at the moment. He gives her no benefit of the doubt.
None
at all. Before we dive into that, I also want to talk about the fact that they are in this public place. Tharion at one point reminds himself they have an audience. Quote, tourists spotted them and began snapping photos along the quay. Saw the River Queen's daughter and began snapping photos of the beauty too. It's an interesting parallel to the start of the book where Tharion was like, he loved to lay out where the tourists could take pictures of him and post about him on social media. So it's an interesting change, right?
Yeah.
Because his vanity continues to be vain. He just doesn't want to be associated with the River Queen's daughter.
That. Yeah. I love that. Good job.
Thanks.
The River Queen's daughter says that he wasn't interested in her at all. Quote, "How many years did I spend trying to coax some affection, some intimacy from you, something to heal this?" He refrained from saying that she'd also been vindictive and childish and sullen. He doesn't even think about his actions, right? Like, she's sitting here being like, okay, I figured this was coming. Like, I tried so hard for us. I wanted this to be fixed. And rather than him being like, wow, she was really hurting for this relationship, he's like, well, like, you've been childish and you've been sullen and you've been vindictive.
Yeah, so I I used to view this scene one way, and now that I've analyzed it, I feel conflicted.
Mhm.
So, I think by the end of this scene, we can see to some extent how Tharion's views of the River Queen's daughter are justified,
Mhm.
right? She
Oh,
does
yeah.
go she does go
Yes.
running to her mother.
Yeah.
However, what he does not do is, even though he views her, and maybe rightfully so, views her as being
Mhm.
childish and vindictive and sullen, he does not take the time to say, even though I view her as this, she does not view her actions that way. She views her
Yes.
actions as trying to coax affection, trying to
Mhm.
be intimate, trying to heal a relationship. And that's not the way I think it should be done.
Yeah.
But I have more respect for her intentions, maybe. Like,
Yes.
he's just like, nope, you're wrong.
He never claims, he never realizes what he's done. Like, he never says
Hmm.
at one point, "I really dragged this on for the
Yeah.
whole time. I made her believe that it could work." There's not that moment.
Yeah.
And to your point, yes, like, she does end up going straight to mommy. But, he just there's no ownership on his part.
Yeah, but also after 10 years, she's probably figured out that's the only thing that gets anything to
His
work.
Yes. It's, "I am what I am because you made me,"
Yeah,
to quote Taylor.
yeah. What bothers me about this is that he so quickly forgets that innocence that he just
Mhm.
saw in her, and her actions, while childish, are also naive and innocent. This is what a
Yes.
child would do. And
Yes.
he is unwilling to try and teach her better. He is unwilling to give her
Mhm.
the benefit of the doubt that she might not know better.
Yeah.
And because of that, he's not able to see his part in her pain.
Mhm.
And I think part of that is because A, the way she acts, B, she actually is extremely threatening. And
Mhm.
I think he has a hard time reconciling this innocent childlike being
Yeah.
with the power that she possesses.
Yeah.
So we see as the scene goes about how that power builds. Quote, "Thunderclouds threatened in her eyes. The water at her feet thrashed. Power stirred around her. His breathing stalled. He'd vastly underestimated her. She stood, somehow towering over him, even though she was more than a foot shorter. Her words were chill wind skittering over the water."
Mhm.
I don't think he's ever seen her as a threat before. And of course, she
No.
has all this power and then says, "I'm going to go tell my mom."
Yeah.
Nevertheless, if she took a moment to be
Mhm.
like, "I have power and I can hurt you,"
I think he'd respect that.
yeah, probably. And she would obliterate him.
Yeah. And he'd respect that obliteration.
And he would stay dead.
Yeah. Everyone wins. The princess, finally tells Tharion that he does not have a true heart, and he thinks, good, at least she finally knew the truth. Even with all of this stuff, he will not admit what he's done wrong, but he does admit his self-hatred. So maybe he doesn't see what he's done to be wrong. Maybe we'll never get that recognition of fault,
Mm,
because every time he does something shitty, it just confirms that he is shit.
yeah.
So why reflect on, oh yes, I did mess up, because then it's just like, no, yeah, you're right. I'm not a good person. What do you expect?
Right. Because to admit you did something wrong, it is to admit you could be better.
Yeah.
You could
Yeah.
do better. And
That
instead
there's another
he's
option. Yeah.
exactly. Instead it's just like, "No, you're right. I'm a bad person. I'm
Mhm.
just bad. That's just my nature. That's who
Yeah,
I am. I can't be
he's
any other way."
I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
Duh.
Do 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 do.
Do, do, do. I was listening to that album a lot lately.
Oh, nice, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
At this point, as we've been talking about, the River Queen's daughter goes to tell on Tharion to her mother. Tharion starts running for his life. And I don't know about you, Jack, but I walked away not really empathizing with either of them.
Yeah.
Whereas, this whole time this whole book, I've
Mhm.
been like, Tharion is cruel and misogynist and,
All those things still true.
I think all those things are still true. I think his views may be also founded in truth, but I think he could do better still.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we don't know what he's running away from. I think this is the first time that we feel like, oh, what he's saying is actually valid. Oh shit, the River Queen really is coming after him.
Yeah.
Which then starts to confirm that what he said, like that maybe something he said was valid. But again, we still don't know what the River Queen would have done. We
Yeah.
don't know, like, it's a lot of assumptions. So, but I agree. I didn't walk away being like, wow, she's completely perfect, or innocent,
Mhm.
because like she still wanted to take him down
Yeah.
to her mom. Her going to go tell her mom, that's not a surprise. Like, I'm like, I do the same. But
Yeah.
but her being like, all right, cool, you broke up with me, let's go down.
Yeah.
That is like, okay, all right, someone's abusing the little princessness
Status. Yeah.
Yeah. Ethan then goes to the my notes are so over this at this point.
I can tell.
Anything with Ethan, I was like, Ethan goes to the brine, brings Hypaxia, finds out about that Sigurd's a Fendir. And I think I was like,
And
done.
Amy, do you want to take
Yeah,
it from
I was
here?
like, Amy, all you. I'm like, I refuse to acknowledge him anymore.
The only note I had from this section is that at one point Sabine tells Ethan, quote, "There are plenty of wolves and plenty of alphas. They are not all our responsibility." And in my book, I wrote truth. And then as I was writing my notes, I was like, is this true? And I wondered for a moment, is this SJM trying to show us the difference between Sabine and Ethan and who they would be as Prime? And are we of the mind that Ethan would be a better suited Prime over Sabine? I don't know.
I think it's SJM trying to fool us into liking Ethan. Because when Ethan says Sigurd's at this point her name's not Sigurd, but I'm not going to call her the wolf mystic. When he's like, that wolf is my responsibility. The truth of the matter is that Ethan feels guilt everywhere else that he has to put it on to other people.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's not out of true compassion. It's out of misplaced grief and other things, other shit with him. So I think when you look at that alone, it becomes very clear that Ethan is not necessarily a good guy. Like, it's not about helping the person. It's about how he feels. I feel like this thing that with Sabine saying there are plenty of wolves, plenty of alphas, they are not our responsibility. We've already established that Sabine is a bad person. So therefore we're like, yo, that's not right. They are our responsibility. And now SJM has trapped me into trying to think along the same lines as Ethan. But I will not be fooled.
I will not be fooled.
Not today, Sarah, not today. We go into chapter 67. Tharion goes to the Viper Queen for help.
Yeah, another thing I question whether or not this was necessary.
Yeah.
I understand it does some setup for the start of Flame and Shadow, but that setup could have started in Flame and Shadow. Like, it didn't necessarily have to be here. Anyway, before Tharion actually gets to the Viper Queen, he's coming into her headquarters. He sees Ariadne, quote, "Bare feet bobbing above her ample backside, the sort of ample backside that on any other day he'd truly appreciate." Sounds like to me he had enough time to appreciate it already.
I know. Go ahead. You can't mention it and say, oh, I didn't appreciate it.
Yeah, you can't put it in the narrative without acknowledging it. And so for me, it tells me Tharion is still always going to think with his penis before his brain.
Maybe it's that he truly appreciate. Like, right now he's only briefly appreciating and not truly appreciating it.
It sounds like to me he's already truly appreciated it.
He's also an ass man. Like, every single time, like, even with that other mayor, he was like, that ass.
Yeah. And look, I don't know. I was just like, this is killing me. Tharion, get out of the picture, please.
It's just the weirdest moments that Tharion, and let's be real, SJM decides to bring in like maleness, where it's like, here he is running for his life and he's like, ooh, that ass. And maybe that's a guy thing. Maybe men are that stupid. You know, maybe SJM just really like nailed it.
I'm an ass woman.
Yeah.
I love asses.
Yeah.
If I was running for my life, I would not be looking at a person's ass.
Maybe we just haven't seen her ass before. Maybe it's that good. Maybe that's on us. Amy's shaking her head no.
No.
Brie Larson's ass.
I love my girlfriend's ass.
Mm-hmm.
I truly appreciate it on a regular basis. But if I'm stressed the fuck out at work, I can promise you I'm not staring at her ass.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know. I feel like some forearms would pull me up. I'm running. I'm like, wait, what?
Ooh, those veins in your forearms.
I know. I'm like, it's so funny, like how, like for women, it's like, you know, ooh, their ass, and I'm like, what's the thing that a guy would have that I would like? I mean, maybe if they're forearms, like maybe a nice
maybe
chest.
their jawline.
I know. They like stubble on it. It's yeah. Recently, I've been admiring rugby player thighs.
Oh, powerful thighs.
I sent like a video to my mom. It was just like close up of rugby players' thighs and stuff. And I was like, I'm just like really into sports. I just like really appreciate sports. I'm a sportswoman now, you know? I'm really into hockey and the safety practices of hockey and wanting to make sure that everyone stretches accordingly. And rugby players and their ability to run. Sorry, I'm about to read a quote and it just works for what I'm thinking. Quote, I'll sell myself to you. So the quote that I'm reading right now, Tharion goes to the Viper Queen and he's like, I will sell myself to you. And he thinks the quote, the words sounded as insane as they felt, but he had no other options. His alternative was another form of slavery. At least here, he'd be away from that stifling court. It's just an insult to slavery and to the people who don't have a choice and to free will and to Lahaba and to Hunt. He ends up not being a slave and he ends up swearing allegiance. It's just an insult and it feels very on brand for Tharion.
Yeah, I completely agree. It minimizes the experience of others who were forced into slavery against their will. I think he also assumes that choosing it means it's not slavery. But
yeah, does he think he's going to get paid for himself and then he gets to put that in his bank account?
He's going to be drugged the entire time. And the Viper Queen's will becomes his will. Like,
yeah,
that's not a great set of circumstances either. I'm going to get into that in a moment. I have so many problems with Tharion. And it's no longer, he's a complex character. Like, he's a dumb character. Earlier in the book, complex character. I enjoyed not liking him. Now I just hate not liking him. Tharion tries to bargain with the Viper Queen to save himself. The question becomes, does the Viper Queen take advantage of Tharion? Because she intentionally, and I'm going to argue the answer is yes, she poses it as if she is not taking advantage. So let me read this quote. A good business person would tell you no, there is no other way, and accept this absurd offer. But, then she points to the Fae guards, they defected from the Autumn King, swore allegiance to me. They've proved loyal. Now, I think on our first reading, this comes across as altruistic because she could say, okay, sell yourself to me, become a slave. Yeah. But she's like, no, I'm going to do one better. I'm not going to take advantage of you right now. I'm going to give you an option. I think this is among the many reasons why we walk away from this book initially thinking that the Viper Queen is going to be good in Flame and Shadow because she doesn't quote unquote take advantage. However, I think she is in fact a good business person. She tells him what's wrong about his proposal and gives him a quote unquote better proposal. She counters so that when he accepts, he feels like he's in power. Yeah. He feels like he didn't drive himself into a corner. He chose the best of two options.
Yeah, he's not a slave. He's just switched courts.
Right. He went in with eyes wide open, which means if he suffers any consequences in the future, he chose it. That was his choice, not because he had no other options.
Someone didn't read the terms and conditions.
Nope, did not read the fine print. And, I think it fools the readers as much as it fools Tharion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, good job, SJM. As much as I dislike Tharion, but great job.
Ethan's plotline truly doesn't need to exist, or need to be explored. Tharion's, while frustrating, is interesting enough.
Agreed.
So Tharion doesn't sell himself, he instead defects. Quote, "She lifted her wrist to her mouth and bit. Blood, darker than usual, welled where her teeth had been. Drink." The floor began to rumble, and Tharion knew it wasn't from the fight, knew something ancient and primordial was coming for him, to drag him back to the watery depths. He grabbed her wrist and brought it to his mouth. He's ingesting her power, which turns out to be addictive. And then, you have the whole blood as food as power and stuff. It just I just remember the thing I told you about I read the other night about blood and
Mhm.
how that was used. That's all. If you want to know more, I'm going to post that on our Patreon.
Oh, man. Ugh.
Tharion enters a shit situation the same way he entered the previous shit situation. Quote, "If he defected from the River Queen, then he could defect from the Viper Queen one day, couldn't he?" Like, we just left the princess and the whole, like, "Well, I thought I could, like, sleep with her and then, like, figure it
Yeah.
out the next day." Yeah.
Yeah.
That it didn't work, and it doesn't work now, it won't work next time, and, but it's consistent, and I do think, though, that this was a really unique way and a good way of showing the same mistake, different thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was well done, very well done.
Yeah, and I don't think the instinct is to observe that this is the
Mhm.
exact same mistake.
Yep, yep, yep. You have to I mean, I didn't realize it was the same thing until the analysis.
Yeah, I completely agree. On one hand, it seems obvious, but having sex with a person and then swearing allegiance to the person
Mhm.
comes across as completely different.
Oh, it does 'cause it is.
But the mistake is repeated, and we're gonna see the same mistake repeated again in the next book, and
Mhm.
like Jack said, I don't like Tharion. I hate Tharion. SJM does such a good job.
I don't think I've seen you dislike a character this much.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree. The only
Yeah.
time I've ever hated a character this much was Angel in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Wow. It makes sense, though.
Yeah. I couldn't eat peaches because Spike called him Peaches. Like, my hate was so strong. It was
What
stupid.
the hell?
I was a teenager. It was stupid, but, like, the amount of hate I had for that character.
That is hilarious. That is so on brand for teenage you.
Yeah, absolutely. My note for Tharion is, like, really, that's your plan?
Yeah, yeah.
I was stuck with the River Queen for 10 years,
Mm. Yeah,
and
the
maybe I can just
princess.
yeah, it's just what it also says is Tharion has commitment issues.
Just my type. Amy's face. I've
He's all
just decided to be more vocal this season. Burn it all to hell.
Good thing the season's almost over.
I know, it's the beer.
Tharion is also a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mhm.
The River Queen's daughter told Tharion he's heartless, before he came running to the River Queen, to the
Mhm.
Viper Queen. So what does he do? He drinks venom that makes him feel heartless.
Yeah.
Quote, "Nothing happened, only that vague sense of cold, of calm. He rubbed at the hollow, strange place in his chest." He did it to himself.
Heartless. This was a very well, beautifully written scene. Like, it between this one and the last one, but, like, Tharion's breaking up with the princess and signing up with the River Queen, or with a Viper Queen is done so well.
Yeah, I think I would challenge beautifully written. I wouldn't say it's beautifully written. I would say it's well crafted.
There you go. Okay, fine. Well crafted. Tharion doesn't get beautifully anything. It's well
No,
crafted.
never. He doesn't deserve beautiful.
No.
When the Viper Queen activates the venom, quote, "Her eyes glowed green and his body turned distant. Her will was his, her desires his own. He'd crawl through coals to fulfill her orders." Now, Tharion felt like this decision was better than being a slave,
Mhm.
better
Mhm.
than being enslaved.
Mhm.
If we look at this from the point of view of the Viper Queen, however, I think she would agree that this is better than being a slave because slaves can resist. They still have some form of agency.
And slaves can be bought out.
Slaves can be bought. Whereas if this person is under her influence, he
Loses
can
their own agency.
cannot have a will,
Yep.
and they always have her will,
Mhm.
then he will never defect. Like,
No, it's great. It's a good plan on her side.
yeah, her comment, they've proved loyal. Well, yeah, they're drugged.
Yeah.
Quote, with each step toward his friends, he could have sworn a long, invisible chain stretched, like an endless leash tethering him, no matter where he went, no matter how far, back to this place. It's this moment where he should have said, oh shit, this is worse than what I asked for.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I should have just sold myself.
Maybe this isn't a great option.
Yeah, it's not. And I don't remember if we made this a theme at the beginning of the book, but it should have been, which is this idea of what is freedom
Mm-hmm.
and what is slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, nobody is free. They might think they're free, but they have the Asteri as overlords. And
Yeah.
even if they didn't have the Asteri as overlords, they have people like the Viper Queen who will entrap
Yeah.
and subjugate people anyway.
I think if I was Tharion, I would have come and been like, buy me, I will pay you double. And then she'll say, what do I have use for money? And then I'd say, a favor from me and another one from Bryce Quinlan.
I mean, really, you could just sell Bryce Quinlan's favors.
Kinda, yeah. Sorry, legs.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. Stick around for part 2, which airs on Thursday.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our forum at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk. Bye. And then I finished the question that you started.
I just started it and I was like, I hope that Amy can understand what I'm doing.
Yeah. We kind of actively have the conversation about this question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if we need to change the question or if we just leave it.
Just leave it.
Fabulous.
And last week we just kind of like answered it throughout.
Yeah, which I
Also.
think is appropriate.
I think it's fine. It's the question that we answer this week.
Yeah.
It's not our fault if we answer it the whole time.
Yeah.
Except it is our fault because it's our podcast, but whatever.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.